Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command, and I'm currently at WesterCon in San Diego doing a presentation on Space Command with our wonderful Space Command actors Brian McClure and Ethan McDowell, and our co-producer and composer David Raiklin, and it's going very, very well. It's really wonderful fun to connect with the fans and show what we're up to and answer questions and talk about Sliders and Deep Space Nine and all these different other shows I've had passing acquaintance with, and and next week it's Comic-Con, the monster. So we'll be doing our Space Command panel there, 11:30 a.m. on Friday, and then I'm on a lot of other panels, and we're doing signings and all sorts of stuff. But that's not what I was here to talk about, because I just saw Terminator Genisys, and basically I just want to talk about it for a few minutes and share my thoughts with you. Now, I doubt very much if there's anyone who's listening to this Mr. Sci-Fi entry who has not seen at least some version of Terminator. But let's go back even farther. When I was a kid, there was a TV show on called Outer Limits, and it was in glorious black and white. And there's a wonderful science fiction writer named Harlan Ellison who wrote City on the Edge of Forever for Star Trek, my favorite episode of the original Star Trek, and he also wrote 2 episodes of Outer Limits. One was called Demon with a Glass Hand, and the other was called Soldier. Now, at that point, Harlan was writing extensively about time travel, as he did in City on the Edge of Forever, and the consequences of time travel and time travel paradoxes and changing the timeline. And Demon with a Glass Hand was starred Robert Culp and Arlene Martell, and Robert Culp plays a man from the future who has escaped into the present day, the Bradbury Building, interestingly enough, which later was used as the location for Blade Runner, and he's trapped in this building, and alien invaders from the future are pursuing him because he has all of humanity has vanished other than him, and they are invaders, and they want to know what's happened to mankind because they're very antagonistic toward humanity. Ultimately, and clever yours if you haven't seen this episode, we discover that he's actually a robot, and all of humanity is stored inside him. They've all been boiled down to their basics, and he has a computer hand that speaks with him, and he has to complete it with different fingers, and it was a great time travel story and a great adventure and really wonderfully done. And the other was Soldier, and that starred Michael Ansara as a soldier from the future who is catapulted by accident to the present day. And it's a future of a devastated landscape with these futuristic soldiers fighting each other, and another enemy soldier comes after him. And neither one is exactly Terminator. And James Cameron, who I know was a fan of the original Outer Limits, because he told me that at one point, James Cameron claims that these were not the inspiration for Terminator. But Harlan Ellison did sue, and at the end of the credits for the original Terminator, it acknowledges the works of Harlan Ellison. And certainly the devastated landscape of the future in Soldier looks very much like the devastated landscape in Terminator. And both of these dealing with human-looking robots and devastated futures and all of that. Certainly there seems to be a science fiction stew that's definitely in the Terminator vein. Now, Terminator came out in the 80s, and it was a low-budget film, but spectacular, of course, and really made Arnold Schwarzenegger had a career before that, but Terminator was definitely his role. And then a few years later, Cameron did Terminator 2, again with Linda Hamilton. And though I do know an actress who was offered that role first and took a different movie, which she regrets to this day, and because it would have been a very different life had she taken that role. But both Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, written and directed by James Cameron, are terrific films. And then they did Terminator 3, which again starred Schwarzenegger, but was not nearly as good a film, and Cameron was not involved with that. And then they did Terminator 4, and that didn't have Schwarzenegger, and it was set in this devastated future, and it had Christian Bale in the role of John Connor, and Christian Bale was doing his hero role, which I very strongly dislike, where he just does this monotone voice and has one expression, and he does that for Batman, and he did it for Terminator 4. And, or Terminator Salvation, if you want to be specific. The director's cut of Terminator Salvation is actually better than the theatrical release, but it's still not great. And it stars the actor from Avatar, and it's okay. It's not a bad film when you see the director's cut, but the ending is very funky. And again, I don't want to spoil that for those who haven't seen it. But now we get Terminator Genisys, and we have Daenerys from Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen, not doing an American accent here, and we have Arnold Schwarzenegger back as the Terminator. And for those who've seen the trailer, and again, I think, don't listen to this if you haven't seen the trailer, at least, because the trailer reveals a lot of the plot turns, which has Schwarzenegger going back as Terminator and saving the child, Sarah Connor, and raising her as a surrogate father, and ultimately destroying his own Terminator self at the beginning of the first movie, where it's the Griffith Observatory. And so it's another timeline, just like with J.J.'s Star Trek. We're in another alternate timeline with an alternate storyline, and we get to see what would have happened. And there's some twists and turns in this movie that are very clever and very interesting, but in the end they fall afoul of the time paradoxes and the timeline. It's like the shoelaces get tied together, and all the cool stuff. For instance, Skynet, which was this military computer that takes over the world and attacks humanity. Well, that was cool and scary in the 80s. But now, in this film, it's Skynet as an app that everyone's going to download to link up all their devices. And I think that's a very fun idea. And John Connor, they do a turn on him that's very different and interesting. But again, once they start to do these tropes, they don't know what to do with them. And so it's a disappointing film. Worth seeing if you're a real fan of Terminator. There's some interesting little bits and pieces. They also, of course, did the Sarah Connor TV show, which again was not thrilling to fans of the Terminator, because again, there's that period starting with Star Wars in '77 and going all through the early '90s with Jurassic Park, where these amazing genre films that were really fresh and new, and pushing the envelope of visual effects, and creating characters that were strong and wonderful and powerful. And now in this summer, we're revisiting all of those franchises, and some of them, like the Mad Max film, are terrific, Fury Road, and some like Jurassic World are at least entertaining and certainly being successful. But others, like the Terminator film, are not fitting the bill, unfortunately. It's fun to see Schwarzenegger back as the Terminator. It's fun to see some twists and turns and gags that are playing on old riffs. The actors in the other roles are not nearly as strong as Linda Hamilton and Edward Furlong, who was great as the young John Connor in Terminator 2. So I guess the bottom line of all of this is, watch it if you'd like to. Enjoy it, get the value. Well, sitting in a dark room with popcorn is always a great thing if it's not too irritating. But if you really want to be entertained, go and watch Terminator 1 and 2. But also, if you want to see something really spectacular and fascinating, go back to the original Outer Limits and watch Soldier and Demon with a Glass Hand. Harlan Ellison is one of the great geniuses of science fiction, and these are two of his greatest works. So, and you can't beat Robert Culp and Michael Ansara, just phenomenal. One little fun side note is that the actor who plays against Michael Ansara in Soldier, Lloyd Nolan, was quite deaf at the time, and he's kind of yelling and speaking loudly. He couldn't hear anything, and so he's kind of a little bit flat, and that's the reason why. But still, Michael Ansara is spectacular, and you can't beat these two great episodes of The Outer Limits. So that's Mr. Sci-Fi for now, from San Diego, California, from WesterCon, and we'll talk again real soon. Mr. Sci-Fi is now an audio podcast, so you can go on iTunes and subscribe to it and listen to the audio. If you don't want to look at me each time you check in with Mr. Sci-Fi, and so subscribe, spread the word. We'll be talking really soon, probably from Comic-Con, and that's it for now. But we're editing Space Command. Things are going very well. It's an exciting time. I'm grateful to everyone who's making my dreams come true, and I hope in a little way to help make yours come true as well. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.